All right, let's chat a little bit about Orlando Pride's preseason roster by position. We're always excited to take a look at some of the names in preseason because there's always so many names to go through and take a look at. We saw 4 goalkeepers listed for this team: Kaylee Collins, McKinley Crone, Anna Morehouse, and Carly Nelson. Still trying to iron things out there in terms of who they're going to roll with going in net with 2023 starting right around the corner. 9 defenders: Carrie Bello, Kaylin Cosme, Tori Hansen, Cecilia. Carrie Lawrence was listed, Emily Madrill, Haley McCutcherson, Megan Montefusco, and Kylie Strom. Midfielders, maybe a little bit of an area that we need to pay attention to because for preseason, they listed a whopping 5 midfielders. Nicole Baxter was brought in as a non-roster invitee. Michaela Clough, Jordan Lishro, Thais Heiss, and Viviana Villacorta are also included amongst the 5 midfielders and 10 forwards. So maybe we're going to see some things shift around here for Orlando because that's a double-digit forwards. That's a lot to have competing for a place in the top line. Messiah Bright, someone who they selected out of the draft, Haley Bujaya, and then they've got Julie Doyle, Adriana Leal da Silva, Leah Pruitt, Kristen Scott, Erica Timrick. We've got Marta, and we've got Ellie Watt and Summer Yates, another one of those draft picks for Orlando Pride. When we're sort of taking a look at everything in front of us here, players that stand out as maybe, ones that we'll see in an ideal starting 11 for the Pride this season.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest question marks comes in the goalkeeper position for this team, losing someone like an Erin McLeod who was a mainstay. Anna Morehouse got time last year with this Orlando team, so that could be somewhere where you slot in. But I think you have to look at the forwards because 10 forwards listed on this roster. Where are they going to slot in? How is that going to work out? I think someone I'm circling in this roster list is a player like Allie Watt. This is a forward that came to Orlando last year from OL Reign, and her first game, she ends up scoring a goal. So it was like, great, we're off on the right foot. We're on to a great start with Allie Watt. And then as the season goes on, it was almost like she got sucked into the Orlando vortex of struggle bus in terms of just not being able to be consistent enough. And that's something that Orlando really struggled with last year. I mean, they had a lot of changes, a lot of mishaps in the front office that causes them to lose not only their head coach, but an assistant coach as well. Having a lot of players be unhappy on the pitch, and that doesn't translate well. And we saw that a lot last year. And then you get a new interim coach coming in at the end of things, not necessarily shaking things up completely, but also trying to change things. You can get back on the winning ways and back to do the correct things at the end of the year to play spoiler if you're not going to push for the playoffs because you're not going to make it. But I think defensively there has to be a little bit of question marks coming in with this team because of the injuries and the trades that happened and who they lost, right? You lose someone like a Courtney Peterson, gets traded to Houston, Tony Presley retires, and now Carrie Lawrence is out. Those are 3 players that saw consistent time last year. And now that you've lost your goalkeeper as well, your starting goalkeeper from last year, how do you establish some consistency and leadership across that back line? Who's stepping up and who's going to take that role and really grab it by the scruff and say, this is my team, this is my defensive organization and structure. I don't know if an Emily Madrill can do that, but I think that she's going to be a really important part of this back line moving forward. I think those are probably some of the biggest questions that I have about this roster. What are we going to see in goal? And then who can play and contribute up top? And I'm looking at someone like an Allie Watt in that front line.
I think when we're looking at the roster in front of us, I think one of the things that Orlando has going for them as a franchise is, this is a club that it's felt like they've been in a rebuild year for the last 5 years. And I think when you are a player competing in that kind of environment, I think there's a real opportunity to say, actually, I can come in here, fight for a starting spot, and never give it back.
Yep.
So I'm looking at players, young players specifically, to try to get in there and sort of have that attitude and sort of, make things interesting in trainings. So it's no surprise that we're going to go with somebody like Emily Madrill as our young prospect for Orlando Pride to kind of, go into preseason, come out of preseason, head into regular season with Orlando and get ready to make an impact. I think that's one of the other things when we're talking about the off seasons and how teams targeted their draft selections. Yes, you have a lot of players that can come in with potential high ceilings and considered top rated talent, right? But very rarely do you get a wide number of players who are considered um, NWSL ready kind of talent. And I think that number narrows even more when you're talking to different clubs and their staffs about navigating the drafts. The idea of saying, "Hey, we want to target some of the top talent in the first round," that window narrows, that pool of player narrows even more when you specify it to who's going to be NWSL ready. You're talking maybe 1 to 2, possibly 3 players within the draft who are going to come in and be NWSL ready, right? Because we hear so often about how the transition from college to the professional league takes some time, and it's difficult for some players to come in and make that immediate impact off the roster. So we've seen in the past players like Atirna Davidson go number one. We've seen Sophia Smith, right? We see what that means when we're looking at players who are going to come in here and make that kind of impact for their teams. And Emily Madrill was a lot of the narrative around her coming into and out of the draft was that she was the most NWSL ready defender out of the defenders amongst the draftees. So we're looking for Emily Madrill to sort of go in there, make an impact. It was great to chat with her on Attacking Third about some of her goals and how she wants to navigate her professional career moving forward. And I won't be surprised if there's a starting 11 that features an Emily Madrill. In that starting back line, which is what you want. I mean, we've seen Megan Montefusco kind of hold things down in one of those center back positions and other rotations around her. So it would be really great for this team to kind of solidify a center back duo, and maybe this could be the start for them.
I think that's a great point. Megan Montefusco with an Emily Madrill in the center back, like that sounds great to me. I want to see it. I want to see how that works out. But you're exactly right. It's a revolving door of that center back position next to Montefusco and kind of who can step in there and be that player. I'm excited to watch Emily Madrill this year go off and be our young prospect. But on this roster, although there are a lot of younger names, maybe some newer names coming in, this is another rebuild year for an Orlando Pride team that has been on this rebuild, as you mentioned, for 5 years, 4 years. They're trying to kind of gain traction with that. And I think one thing that this Orlando Pride team can do to gain that traction in their rebuild and continue to get better is lean on their veterans. And one of their veterans that re-signed this year early in December with a 2-year contract under Seb Hines with Orlando is a player like Erica Timrak. This is a forward that definitely plays in the midfield for Orlando, and she can solidify a lot of things. She's a veteran in the league. She's been playing in this league since 2013, so she knows what is expected of her, what is expected of the league, what is expected of the team. And she's been with Orlando since 2021 after Utah Royals was no longer a team. This is a player in Timrak that I'm hoping can lead the way for this Orlando Pride team. I think if we see her in the midfield alongside someone like Viviana Villacorta that's coming back from injury that she suffered late in last year, that's a duo that I'm really excited to see. Throw in a Michaela Clough in there, Jordan Listro that we saw last year. Erica Timrak is the player that can be the most consistent on this roster, that can really tie together everything that was started at the end of 2022 under Seb Hines and take those steps and be that building player that continues to go with this team and make them one of the best. But she's got to put it all on her back, a player like Timrak.
I'm with you. 100%. I think when we're looking at this roster, it would have been easy to take a look at someone like Marta and say, this is the player that this team, especially younger players, are going to draw off of and sort of feed off of their energy and look to as an example for someone who has been around as long as Marta has. But I'm I'm absolutely with you, and I love that we narrowed it down to someone like an Erica Timrak, because, like you said, you talked a little bit about her career already. She's someone who has played in this league since 2013, but the fact that this player came out of retirement essentially to make a return to play in the NWSL, I think also speaks a lot to who Timrak is as a not just a person, but as a player. So to kind of go from a former Kansas City franchise that went through some troubled times despite winning multiple championships, ended up folding, going to Utah Royals and tried to build something with the franchise out there. That team also going through a transition and ended up, coming out of that was Kansas City Current. And she retired in the beginning of 2020. At that point, have already made like over 100 appearances in NWSL. So her making the return to NWSL, I thought was very unique and very special, because the Pride essentially acquired her rights as part of a bigger trade. So you're wondering, like, what is that going to mean? What are the conversations like with a player to convince them, right, to come out of retirement and come back and play for a franchise that we've been talking about that has sort of hit this reset button time and time again, right? So I think that this is a player that we're going to see this team rely upon a lot. I think they've done it. I think they've done that already a little bit. I mean, Timrick is a player who has put in shifts for this team in the midfield when people were looking at Orlando and saying, "Where is your midfield?
Yeah.
Where's Eric Timrick?" Right. So I'm curious to see the type of responsibility that Seb Hines is going to task her with moving forward. I'm also curious to see if this is a player that they're going to look to and hand off the captain's armband to. I mean, who's going to be the captain, right, moving forward for this Orlando Pride team after we saw that armband kind of get passed around between, I think it was Jan's daughter and I think it was McLeod as well. I think we've seen Marta wear it at times, but you want to have that go to someone who's going to be consistent and be part of those starting 11s week in and week out, someone that players can look to, as the pointer and the yeller and the director of things. So we're looking at Timrak as sort of someone who's going to fulfill that role for this team moving forward. And you know what? Because it's a World Cup year, I think it makes sense that we go with someone like Timrick, because somebody like Marta is probably going to be gone with Brazil for the upcoming World Cup. But it's not just Marta. They could also lose somebody like Adriana. We just saw this player alongside Marta in She Believes Cup as well. If fans out there aren't too familiar with her play, you can go back and maybe take a look at some of those 3 She Believes Cup matches. But a couple players here that they're going to be missing in light of a World Cup. All the more reason I think that we take a look at Timrak and say, hey, they might rely on this player. So to wrap things up here, let's maybe take a look at a couple things. We want to ask the biggest burning question for Orlando Pride, and we want to make a projected finish prediction. But when it comes to the biggest burning question for Orlando Pride, we went back and forth a little bit on this.
Yeah, this was a hard one.
Yeah, we do the content planning for these episodes, right? And we have these conversations and we're just like, geez, like what is it going to be for Orlando this year? Because you take a look at what they went through in 2022, ending out their season in 10th place. You take into consideration the off season that they had. And some of this, though, when we were contemplating this, is repetitious. It just sort of feels like Orlando has set themselves up for that rebuild year repeatedly for like almost, we said 5 years jokingly.
It's like Groundhog Day.
It's like Groundhog Day. So let's say maybe somewhere between like 4 to 3 years, maybe not 5 years. Like, they did make the playoffs.
We're exaggerating. We were exaggerating a little bit.
We like to have fun here. We like to have fun. So they made the playoffs under Sermani in 2017, right? They eventually introduced Mark Skinner they also did not have, you know, they also had consecutive bottom table, second half of the table type of finishes. Then you have Mark Skinner depart back to England, coaching in WSL now. What's going to happen for this team moving forward? And within these windows of time, there are like these brief stretches of success for the Pride. We saw under Skinner, they went on like a 7-game undefeated to start their regular season, and then obviously his departure came, and then they just sort of fizzled out down the stretch. And then
that was 2021.
and then it's like, oh yeah, we're gonna enter our actual rebuilding era once more. It's not gonna be with Skinner, it's gonna be with Amanda Cromwell. And then that all happened. You can go back and check the episodes when we talked all about it. Look it up on A3. So then
gets fired halfway through the
season, and you've got Seb Hines now. So there's a lot of context here that we have in front of us when we're talking about biggest burning question. So we want to know from Orlando Pride, will this season actually be the first block in an official rebuild for this franchise?
It has to be that question because they've been looking up the mountain at a rebuild for years. Can they start to build? Can they start to take those steps? And I think what we highlighted earlier in this conversation with our young prospect and defender Emily Madrill out of FSU and the veteran forward midfielder Erica Timrak, it starts with those pieces. Can they be the ones to put down this first foundation layer with what Seb Hines is giving them as a team and as a roster, as a club, and start that rebuild? This team has to put on their horse blinders. They have to block out the noise, block out anything we say here on this show, block out what the haters say, block out what their fans say to some extent, put their head down and work this year and make sure that they are starting something new with this new generation and this new wave of Orlando Pride that they have with them. I think, we talked about it at the top of this conversation about Orlando Pride. They've also got Haley Carter in their front office. This is a player or a former player that is now into the administrative role in the NWSL. And I think that's also going to kind of turn the tide a little bit for this team and help them put down that first block for this official rebuild. And it starts at both ends, right? Whether you're a draftee coming in to make a name like Emily Madrill, or you're the general manager of a team in Haley Carter. And I think that the entire club is getting on the same page about what they want to be as a club, as a team, and what they want to do this year. Put their horse blinders on, and it starts day one, March 25th. Can this be the start of a new leaf for Orlando Pride?
We love to have jokes. We love to have fun here on A3. So maybe we transition this to the projected finish, because we sort of feel like we're presenting that biggest question, and we're bringing the hype and we're bringing the energy, and we want to buy into this
I do want
to buy into the rebuild. A3 wants to buy into the rebuild, which breaks my heart that we have to talk about this projected finish, because we still have Orlando Pride finishing within either the final bottom 3 or final 3 of the 2023 season. That's not to say that there's still not going to be things to buy into in terms of a rebuild for this team. I think we talked a lot about individual pieces and things to get excited about. And I think even within a rebuild year, even within a potential bottom half, possibly bottom table, like last of the table kind of finish, there are things to highlight and get excited about. I'm excited to see Seb Hines get a full season in front of him. This team, especially after chatting with him and talking about the biggest thing that he wanted out of 2022 was more time with that roster, that they wanted to target players and re-sign them from that 2022 roster and make sure that they were back in 2023 to work with them. So there are things I think to get excited about. they're going to see the return of Marta and extended minutes. They're going to see the return of Viviana Villacorta. This is one of those draft pieces that they selected to try to build a young core in this team, and they should still be excited about this player.
And she was on such a high before she got that injury. She was getting so many consistent minutes. She was a crucial part of this Orlando midfield. And oh God, heartbreaking. I remember that game where she went down with that ankle injury and she just looked devastated on the sidelines. Oh God, that was so sad to see. So that's a player I agree. I want to get back on this roster. Imagine Villacorta in the midfield with a Marta. Like, yes, Orlando has all the pieces. They've got to put it together. But I agree. I don't know. I think that this could still be a bottom table team, but that doesn't mean they haven't taken their first step in the rebuild. It doesn't mean that they didn't put down the foundation about what this team and this club could be in the next several years if they finish at the bottom of the table still.
We're going to get to see sophomore seasons for Michaela Clough. And we're also going to, not only for Seb Hines to get a full season, but we're going to get to see, hopefully, a full season of Allie Watt with this team.
Yes.
So let's see. Let's present the question of whether or not
there's a lot to be excited and hopeful about with this team.
We're going to keep it. We're going to present that question. We're going to make sure and see and ask of Orlando if this is going to be the season where we see this first official block in a rebuild, and try to compare that with how they finish in the regular season. Stay tuned. We'll have to see. We want to see Orlando Pride finally take that first step officially.